Had a rough time.
XM radio audience, there had just been a succession of significant stories published in the New York Times about a June 9, 2016 meeting in Trump Tower that we now know was attended by Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort, among others. As I've updated my radio audience on those developments, I've been careful to balance my coverage with perspective from the right. On Monday, after my news summary, the phone lines quickly filled. And first up was a caller who told me that I should be ashamed of myself because I had spent time on the latest bombshell from the New York Times, notwithstanding that I had balanced it with a view from the New York Post. The first caller was Brad. He was from Iowa.
I thought you were better than this. Keep kicking that dead dog, Michael. Maybe it'll wake up.
Do you find it significant that the president's son took a meeting with a Russian national involved Manafort and Kushner where the promise was, we are bringing you dirt on Hillary? Significant or not?
Big deal. No, not at all. Who cares about dirt on that old haggis of Hillary?
That's not typical. My callers tend to come from the lower 48 and usually represent a nice cross-section of the country, both racially and politically. But to my surprise, the next caller from Vermont basically agreed with Brad. Many on hold wanted to castigate the president and his son. But instead of taking their calls, I did something I'd never done in 27 years of radio hosting. I cleared the call board, and I requested only callers who agreed with the first two. And the results were eye and ear opening. I discovered a huge number of others also maintaining it was the proverbial nothing burger. Take a listen.
CNN, New York Post, New York Times, these guys, they have 0 ounce of credibility. I say zero, negative zero. I mean, they're just horrible.
Some of the media outlets get so in the weeds with some of these stories that it just disinterests me after a little while. So even if it's true, that's fine. It eventually didn't affect my vote at the ballot box.
It is an important, worthy story, but give it the time it needs and then move on.
So at this point, it just seems like a witch hunt after President Trump.
The only thing I'm angry about Trump is he hasn't arrested that witch yet. She should be in cuffs. You're an establishment that's all you are. You're a piece of
That last part, by the way, directed at me. I'm the establishment, well, you heard it. So if you think the Donald Trump Jr. story is the one that changes Trump supporter minds, you might want to think again. My experience reminded me of candidate Donald Trump saying that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and not lose his base. These voices were clearly a revelation to many who don't typically hear them on their go-to news outlets. I made a Facebook montage of the audio of these callers to share these thoughts with the world. It quickly racked up more than 100,000 views in less than 48 hours. Now, just to recap, here's what all those callers deemed to be unimportant. Over 3 days, the New York Times had kept drilling down on the story of Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, and Jared Kushner meeting with a Russian lawyer. First, the meeting was denied. Then a false reason for the meeting was offered, the discussion of adoptions of Russian infants. And then finally, the Times called to tell Jr. they were about to publish his emails, and he released them himself. They revealed that at a minimum, he was game to collude with the Russians. Who could have imagined that there would actually be an email to somebody named Trump offering, quote, very high-level and sensitive information, able to, quote, incriminate Hillary as part of, quote, Russia and its government's support of Trump over Hillary. But not even these revelations impacted his standing with the base. Joining me now, Matthew Rosenberg of the New York Times, who's been part of the Times' ongoing terrific reporting of all of this. Selena Zito, the Trump whisperer, who writes for the Washington Examiner and the New York Post and is co-authoring a book about why Trump won. Matthew, does that frustrate you to know that your hard work and that of your colleagues in some instances is falling on deaf ears?
No, I mean, I think that's kind of the nature of the beast here. People aren't always going to agree. And I do hear people when they say, well, why is this important to me? Because, look, you're going to go to work tomorrow, you've got bills to pay tomorrow, your kids are going to go to school tomorrow. This doesn't change your life immediately. But I would say to people who are concerned or who don't think this has any real import, that, you know, it's not just dirt on Hillary Clinton or dirt on a political opponent. We don't want, or we don't have, I guess, allowances to have foreign governments feed information, provide resources to political campaigns, because we don't want foreigners playing a role in our elections. It's the same reason why you have to be a citizen to vote. You can't just wash up in the U.S. and decide, I'm going to vote today. You know, you have to have lived, you have to be a citizen. And these emails really do establish, more than anything else, a direct line to the Trump family, to their inner circle, between them and the Russian government, saying, look, we want to help you. How far did it go? We don't know. And that's the thing. There's a lot we don't know here. One of your, one of the callers who you cited at the beginning of the show, so you know this needs time. She's absolutely right. This kind of investigation could go on for years. But it is something that I think we should be concerned about. And the most, I guess the last point and the most important point is that this kind of interference, attempt to meddle in the election, yes, it happened last year. It's going to keep happening. And people are going to learn from their mistakes. And the one way you learn, and you learn to stop it, is by studying what happened in the past, by investigating it. And I think that's one of the reasons why people should be a bit concerned, yes.
Selena, you know this constituency. Is it that they are standing with the President of the United States, or that they are anti-Trump? And does it matter?
Well, I think the thing that we need to maybe think about and explore deeper going forward is this distrust that the American people have with big institutions, but also with media. This is something that has been ongoing. The last time we had a broad trust with the media was in 1964, right? 78% of the people trusted government, trusted the media. That has just cratered since then, and it's in the opposite. You know, it's sort of flipped around. And so it's not just that they firmly, you know, are not going to be dislodged from Trump. It's also that they view us with a lot of skepticism. Some of that is deserved, most of it is not. But I think that that's the thing that we need to, honestly, we need to address that, because the American people should have much more level of trust with the people that are who are guarding and digging into the greater powers in this country. And you know,
let me tell you when I think it changes. I don't think it changes, no disrespect to Matthew and the Times. It doesn't change when the Times has yet another revelation on the front page. It changes when those mouthpieces for the right, to which leadership of the Republican Party has been abdicated, when they start to take a serious look at what Matthew and his colleagues are reporting. I'll give you an example. I showed a snippet of it. Let me show you more of what Shepard Smith said on Fox News yesterday. Roll this.
This really shouldn't be a matter of liberal versus conservative, pro-Trump versus anti-Trump. If you're a fair-minded citizen, you ought to be concerned about the fact that we were repeatedly misled.
They tell us there's nothing to this and nothing came of it. There's a nothing burger. It wasn't even memorable. Didn't write it down. Didn't tell you about it because it wasn't anything, so I didn't even remember it. Why all these lies? Why is it lie after lie after lie?
And maybe you're saying, well, you know, Shep, unlike some of the others, will step outside the box from time to time. Catherine, put up on the screen Krauthammer's syndicated column. This comes from the Washington Post, Charles Krauthammer. Just look at the first line. Charles Krauthammer, the evidence is now shown. This is not hearsay, not fake news, not unsourced leaks. This is an email chain released by Donald Trump Jr. himself. Matthew, when it's the Charles Krauthammers, when it's the Shepard Smiths starting to say, hey, you know what, this Times reporting, substantive. Maybe then the base reconsiders or not. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's possible. I think there's a certain percentage of Americans, both on the left and the right, who vote their identity. They're not going to shift. They're not going to change. But there is a tremendous amount of Americans, I think a huge number of them, who would be fairly horrified to know that a president, the president now, if he did, or if anyone close to him did, work with the Russian government to help secure his election, even if it didn't have any effect, would be horrified to know if that is the case. And so, yeah, I do think these things can have an effect over time, and that you're absolutely right. The New York Times is not going to be the people who immediately make people say, oh, wow, I've changed my mind. It's going to come when their own leaders, the commentators they look to for guidance, say, hey, you know what, you've got to pay attention to this. There's a problem here.
Hey, Selena, I don't want to focus only on the media. Let's also take note of the fact that although I think that this was an enormously significant week, the Republican leaders in the House and Senate have largely been silent, much in the same way that those callers from the base were reacting to me. What do you have to say about the GOP leadership on this?
I think the GOP leadership is in a really terrible position, right? Because, you know, if you drill down and you look at the numbers of where Trump won and where he won big, you know, that's in their districts. And so there's a political price to pay as to, do you step out in front of this? Do you stand back? I think that the caller, the female caller that you had, who said this is important and we should, but we'll give it time. I hear a lot of that, not just from regular voters, but I also hear that from people who are inside Washington, people who are part of the establishment, people that are elected officials. One thing I do want to point out that I have found fascinating is the amount of people who didn't vote last year, you know, who found both of them sort of, you know, repulsive. They tend to cheer Trump on when he has a problem with the media, when these kinds of stories come out, and I find that, you know, fascinating. Like, we really have a problem that we have to take on.
Matthew, final question for you. As I've read carefully the stories unfold, I wondered, did the Times have the Trump Jr. email all along? Did you reveal only a little and almost set a trap for him to come up with that adoption story and sort of, frankly, dig his own grave, politically speaking?
You know, I wish we were that savvy. I can't get into exactly how the story unfolded, what we had when, and who we got it from. My colleagues did fantastic work on this story. And I think, you know, it really does highlight the fact that there's an email out there. This has been news for months. This has been an issue for months. There were multiple opportunities for Paul Manafort, for Jared Kushner, and for Donald Trump Jr. to say, hey, you know, we had this meeting, and here's what happened at it, and this is why I don't think it's a big deal. Nobody ever did. And then the transparent moment when Donald Jr. said, oh, I'm just going to publish all these emails. That was done because that morning the New York Times had called them, told them, we've got this email, we're printing it, we're going to publish it. And then suddenly the White House and Donald Trump Jr. became transparent. That was not a kind of self-awareness, kind of, oh, I'm going to have this moment, I'm going to become transparent. They did it in response to the fact that those things were about to be published. And I think that is something people
Okay, but I think you're saying you didn't. I think you're saying the Times didn't have the email when last Saturday you dropped the first story. That's what I'm hearing.
I can't say one way or the other. I really can't. And I hate to pull like a James Comey or an FBI or CIA thing here, but it's just one of the things, like on the internal reporting dynamics, we don't get into. We tend to publish what we know when we know it. So I can say that.
Okay, I hear you. It's a part of the story. I'm eager to learn. Anyway, thank you. Selena Zito, as always. Matthew Rosenberg, thank you both. I appreciate it. What are your thoughts? Tweet me at Smirkanish or go to my Facebook page. I'll read some responses throughout the course of the program. What do we have, gang? It's just wild. These callers sound like they've been brainwashed by a cult. They just refuse to believe the evidence right before their eyes and put on blinders when it comes to Trump. Jennifer, I didn't have to go to the callers to be exposed to this mindset. I'm, as I like to say, a butter knife away at family gatherings from much of this thought process. But it's a wake-up call for those of us who are reading all these revelations, the Times, the Post, here at CNN, and thinking, my God, this is really significant. 46% of the folks in this country are saying hogwash. One more if we have time. I'm glad you took these calls, Michael, because it ultimately does no good to ostracize or ignore people with differing views. Patrick, I don't ostracize, and I like to hear from all points of view. Even the guy who called me, you heard what he called me. Up next, Roger Waters, formerly of Pink Floyd, is back on the road stage.
Missing emails from Russian hackers. CNN's Brian Todd digs deeper into this story for us. Brian.
Anna, we're getting startling new information.